All right, so let's start off by grabbing one of our mixing bowls. I would use the bigger one of the two if you have multiple mixing bowls, like different sized. And also grabbing your measuring cups. I was forgetting to get something out, and then it's the measuring cup. All right, so I'm going to be doing a half batch of these while you guys are going to be doing a full batch. So you guys are going to do is you're going to put 1 cup of flour into the bowl and 2 tablespoons. So 1 cup and 2 tablespoons right into the bowl.
Okay, I already measured out to 1.5 cups.
So it's only going to be 1 cup and 2 tablespoons into the bowl.
So
then the rest of it is for
remeasure.
Yep. The rest of it is for rolling it out. All right. And 1 tablespoon. Great. All right. And you could just give it a shake to get it into a nice pile. It doesn't have to be perfect. Great.
Okay.
So just so I know, give me a thumbs up if you're cooking with me. I know Deborah's cooking with me. Who else is cooking right now? Kate is cooking. Bowen is cooking. Kate, Brendan, Dashika, Judy. Perfect. So I might not have caught everybody, but if you are cooking, I'm going to try to catch in with you guys for the notes. Just let me know if you need something repeated, okay? All right.
Okay.
So for all my friends who are cooking, do we all have the 1 cup and 2 tablespoons of flour in the bowl? You could just give me.
Not yet. I blew it, of course.
That's okay. Take your time. The next thing we are going to add is we are going to add the salt. So you guys can either do like 2 pinches of salt or you can measure it out. It's going to be a half a teaspoon added right to the flour.
Sorry, that was salt?
Yep.
Okay.
1/2 teaspoon right to the flour. Yep.
My thinking I was going to be ready by measuring everything out first was a mistake.
No, it's totally fine. You were trying to be prepared. Yeah. So when you guys get the recipes, it'll say like the total amount of flour, but we need some of that flour is for when we're rolling it out. But no problem. I appreciate the proactive. Perfect. So just go ahead. Once you get your salt and your flour, just give it a quick mix with your fork just to try to get it a little incorporated.
Okay.
And it's 1/2 teaspoon of salt.
What'd you say? What salt? 1/2 what of salt?
1/2 teaspoons, so a half a teaspoon.
Oh, okay. Definitely.
Perfect. So you're on that step. So what we're gonna do, we're gonna wait 1 second before we move on to the next big step.
1001.
I'm sorry?
1001. The second is up.
Yeah. So what you're gonna do is you're gonna take your fork, and what we're gonna do is we're gonna kind of create like a nest in the flour. So just use your fork to drag the flour to the sides. You guys have more flour in your bowl, so you might not be able to see the bottom of your bowl. That's fine. We just want like a nice hollow kind of nest.
Okay.
Hi, just to confirm, that was 1 cup and 2 tablespoons of flour and 1 teaspoon of salt, right?
1/2 teaspoon of salt.
Okay.
If you did you use a whole teaspoon in the dough?
Actually, let me look. Oh no, I used a half. Sorry. Okay.
Okay, perfect. No, that's fine. I was just gonna say, if you accidentally use the whole teaspoon, just don't add any to the mixture, the ricotta, but you're fine.
Okay.
That's how we would have solved that. All right. So what we're gonna do now is we're gonna start adding our wet ingredients. So the first thing we're gonna do is we're gonna crack 2 eggs right into the hole we made. Again, I'm only doing
that because I tend to crack the shell. So I do it into a cup and then pour it. That way I don't get the shells in it.
perfect. So if you have a tendency of doing that, definitely go ahead and use a separate thing. You could crack it right into one of your measuring cups if you want.
Not for you extra.
We're just going to go ahead and crack. You don't have to do anything yet. Just go ahead and crack it.
So have you given up on the counter method like Lydia does, because it's going to be a mess?
Okay.
I'm sorry.
Oh, Megan, have you given up on the pile in the middle of the counter like Lydia does it? Because it's going to be a mess.
Yep, so I'm actually going to do mine right on the counter too. And when I'm done with it, I just use like the rough side of my sponge and I'll put some soapy water on it, let it sit for maybe a minute, and then it comes right up. But definitely wipe off all the dry flour first so you don't end up with a pile of glue.
And if we're
Alrighty.
doing the whole thing, we do both eggs at the same time?
Yep, you're doing 2. I'm only doing half the recipe, so I only have
no, I understand. Okay,
Yep.
thank you.
No problem. So yeah, go ahead, crack both eggs in there. If you get shell, don't worry. You could fish it out with one of your spoons, or you can crack it into a separate container and pour it in. I'll give you guys another second for the second eggs. And then we're gonna add our very last ingredient to the pasta. So pasta is, especially the recipe we use, it's only really 4 ingredients. So nice and easy. The hard part comes with the kneading, which we'll talk about. So the next thing you guys are going to do is you're going to add 1 teaspoon of oil. You can use any oil you want. I'm using olive today, but I've done it with vegetable, canola. It doesn't seem to make a difference.
Okay.
1 teaspoon right on top of the egg.
This is much more fun than doing it by yourself.
Oh yeah, definitely. Makes a big difference. Oops, my thing fell off my mouth. All right, and then we're gonna mix this kind of a funny way, a little bit different than we mix other things. So we have this nice nest of flour with our egg in the middle. What we're gonna do is I start by popping the yolk, and I just give it a quick pop and pull up. And then we're just gonna go ahead and lightly mix the egg together with the oil in the middle. It's okay if some flour gets in it. We're just not trying to get all of the flour. So go ahead and give that, and I have my fork to the bottom of the bowl too, so it is pulling some flour up into it already. Don't worry about that. Just go ahead and give it a nice mix. You're essentially whisking the egg with the flour being the bowl. All right, that looks pretty smooth to me. I have some white that is a little, you know how it is, making, even when you make scrambled eggs, sometimes the egg white is a little reluctant to get mixed in. Just try to get the best you can. There we go, I'm happy with that. All right, and once you kind of have the middle whisked together, you're just gonna go ahead and pull some flour from the side. So see how I'm sticking my fork in the flour and I'm just pulling it in, but still leaving some on the edge, right? So you're gonna pull in about half of the flour from the edge. And then we're just gonna do the exact same thing, whisk it all together. This time you could do bigger circles since you have more of the flour and more space. Get that kind of mixed together, add a little bit more. There's no specific amount to add each time. We're just doing little by little, getting it mixed together. I also recommend using a fork for this because what's going to happen is the flour is going to coat the outside of the egg and you'll end up with like big wet pieces of egg coated dry in flour. So I usually will take my fork and kind of like push the prongs through it to make sure that doesn't happen. And then after you've done it like 1 or 2 times, you could start mixing all of the flour together. So do you see what I'm talking about? How like it's really wet on the inside here, but it's all coated in flour. So I'll just go and I'll push up the side of the bowl with the prongs of the fork. And that kind of cuts the flour in a bit. And we're just gonna make kind of like a loose dough with this. It's okay if you still have some flour hanging out. You use the side of the bowl to get the extra dough off if it's sticking to your fork.
Now the dough's sticking to the bottom of the dish, the bowl.
Use your fork to scrape it off.
So it doesn't, it's not going to be too sticky then.
Yeah, it'll be good. Mine's not super sticky either. It's actually kind of sticking together nicely.
We joined a little late. Is that the full amount?
Yeah, this is half of the amount. I'm only doing half of the product. I'm sorry.
Okay, no, that's fine. We joined a little late and it looked like 1 egg, but we weren't 100% sure.
Yep, perfect. So if you guys are going to do the whole recipe, you guys are going to do, I don't know how far back you joined, so I'll just give you the amounts for the whole recipe. You're going to do...
We're fine. We got the recipe from the website.
Oh, okay, perfect. You got it? Perfect. From the website. I didn't even think we had this up on a website. All right. So we're going to go ahead and just make sure it's all mixed. So mine's come together into a dough. It's kind of like sticking together, but not all together. That's fine.
Well, mine's sticking all together, so that's okay though, right?
Yep, that's totally fine. All right. So what we're going to do now is we're just going to get our dough shaped into a ball. So how do we want to do this? Let me think. Actually, we're going to let that sit for a second. And what we're going to do is we're going to make our ricotta mixture just so you guys don't get your workspace dirty and then have to like work on it. We're going to make our filling. So go ahead and grab another mixing bowl. All right. And what we're going to do is we're going to add 1 cup of ricotta cheese right to the bowl. So I'm going to do a half cup because remember, I'm doing a little less. If your ricotta is wet on top, just give it a stir with a spoon. Very hard to open these. There we go.
I think it's too dry. It doesn't really come together. It's almost like there's too much flour. I probably shouldn't have put it all in.
Did you measure out the 1 cup and 2 tablespoons of flour?
Yeah, perfect.
Okay. It should be fine. We'll work with it in a second. And if you have to, you'll be able to like wet your hands and play with it.
Maybe my egg.
Also, the different size eggs and then the scoops and stuff could sometimes make a difference too. So go ahead and put 1 cup of ricotta right into your bowl. And make a little extra filling. There we go. All right. So for my friends who are cooking, has everyone added their ricotta yet? You can give me a thumbs up. Ellen, good. Judy, good.
Yes, I did. I don't know how to put a thumbs up on this thing. So.
That's okay. Deborah's good. Nice. Bowen, good. Kate, good. All right, and Brendan is good. All right. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna have our ricotta, and now we're gonna add our mozzarella cheese. So these are gonna be really cheesy and really good. So you guys are gonna add a 1/2 cup of shredded mozzarella right to your ricotta. All right, I'll give you guys another minute to get that in the bowl, and then we're gonna work on adding our Parmesan cheese. So for Parmesan cheese, we're just gonna add 1/4 cup. So it gets like cut in half.
The whole 1/4 cup?
1/4 cup right into the thing, yep.
Okay.
I'm gonna use a spoon or a mixing spoon just to get this mixed around. And ricotta kind of like retains the shape of the container. So just go ahead and make sure that you're breaking it up and making it kind of like a smooth paste. I push mine on the side of the bowl to kind of help with that. And then you'll end up with like this really nice cheese mixture.
I'm sorry, Megan. How much of the Parmesan cheese do we need to add?
1/4 cup.
Thank you.
No problem. So this filling is really easy where the amounts of cheese kind of just get cut in half. So ricotta's 1 cup. The mozzarella cheese is a 1/2 cup, and then the parm is 1/4 cup. So it's just a real basic cheese filling.
A lot more filling than dough.
What'd you say?
Have a lot more filling than dough.
This dough is gonna spread out huge once we roll it out. All right. And you might have a little extra, which is always fine. You could always make like a lasagna with it too. All right. So, or even a big ziti if you have extra. All righty. So now we're gonna season it. So I'm gonna be adding some salt and pepper. And I'm just gonna do a pinch of each. So I'm just gonna sprinkle the pepper right into my hand. That looks like a pretty decent amount. Just like a pinch. For the salt, I'm gonna do the same thing. Just like a pinch. And then if you guys have any like Italian seasonings, like parsley, basil, oregano, you could add a pinch of that right into. I'm gonna add some parsley to mine. I'm gonna take the lid off so it actually could come out. There we go. Some parsley. I love garlic and I love onions, so I'm gonna add some garlic powder and just like a nice little shake. And I'm also gonna add some onion powder. This is where you guys get to be creative with the recipe. You could add whatever you want. And typically with this, any kind of Italian seasonings that you would add to any other Italian dishes are gonna be great. If you wanted to get funky, you could do a pinch of nutmeg, but I'm not gonna do that one today, but you guys are definitely more than welcome to. All right, that's our filling. Looks good. And once you're done with your filling, you could leave the spoon in the bowl. You can go ahead and put it right in your fridge. So I'll give you guys a minute to season, and then we'll finish up our dough.
We're using butternut squash instead of ricotta, I just wanted to say, because we don't eat dairy.
Oh, okay, perfect. That's probably going to be super tasty. So.
And then we're going to use the dairy-free cheese for the other parts.
Oh, perfect. Definitely let us, this goes for everybody. Like, I won't see the finished product because we're going to finish putting some of them together. By the time class is done, we'll probably have 1/4 of the dough, like, rolled out and making the ravioli. So I'm not going to see your finished product. So I definitely want to. So you could always email photos to Amanda at the library and she'll pass them on. I always want to see what you guys make. Alrighty, so give me a thumbs up for all my friends who are cooking. Who has their filling in the fridge?
Excuse me, I didn't hear that.
Do you have, I was just asking if you have your filling in the fridge.
Yes.
Perfect. Bowen, Kate, Ellen, Deborah, Judy, you're good. Brendan's good. Christina and Colin, I see you're getting there.
Yeah, Krista, I have a question.
Yep.
The olive oil was in the pasta?
Yes.
Thank-
No problem. If you forgot, did you not add it to your pasta? I know you guys came a little late.
Yeah, we didn't, and it looked, I have the egg and the flour, and it looked a little dry.
It looks a little dry. So what you can do is, I'm not sure how it will go trying to mix it into a dough that's already half made. But what you can do is you could try to use, like, wet your hands in this thing so they're not totally soaking wet. And you could touch your dough to add some moisture that way. You're welcome to try it with like oil and water. I'm just not sure how it'll come, since once the dough kind of forms, it's a little resistant to absorb liquid.
I think we caught it just in time.
Perfect. All right. So what we're going to do now is we're going to roll out our dough. So I don't like to stick my hands in my bag of flour once I have dough on my hands. So what I'm going to ask you guys to do is take a measuring cup. It doesn't matter the size of the measuring cup. I'm going to use my half cup because it's already dirty from flour. So you guys can use your whole cup. It doesn't matter. And just take a scoop of flour out. I don't have the whole half cup. This is going to be our flour reserve. So this is going to be the flour we have to roll our pasta out. So go ahead, and I'm going to move this out of the way. Give me 1 second. There we go. You're just going to go ahead and flour your workstation.
Can I do it on one of those cookie sheets you bake on?
Absolutely. You'll just need to put something underneath it so it doesn't shift. And that would be like a wet towel or a damp towel or a damp paper towel. It might shift still, so you might end up needing to shift halfway to adjust the counter, but either way is fine. All right, and then we're just
still put flour, right?
Yep. Then you're gonna go ahead and toss your dough into the flour. So if you're using something besides your counter, you'll still need to flour the work surface.
Okay.
And then we're just gonna go ahead, use our hands to shove it together into a dough. So you might
The whole thing? Making the whole
thing.
The whole thing, okay.
Yep. So you're just gonna need to kind of use your hands to form it into like a ball, so it's all sitting together like that. Sorry, I know the lighting isn't always the best in here.
Mine still seems rather stringy, sort of, you know.
That's okay. So mine was falling apart too, but I pinched it together. So I like turned it and I pushed it down on the counter into one pile.
Sticking to my hands though, even though I put flour on them.
That's okay. So go ahead and put more flour on top and more onto your hands. Okay. If it sticks to you or the counter at any point, add some more flour to it. Because even though the outside here is all white and floury, if I were to bend this open, it's still very, like, you know, wet on the inside. We haven't kneaded it yet. So we'll get everything going now. So for everybody, who's ever kneaded pasta dough before? Anybody ever knead pasta dough?
I tried making those gnocchis.
The gnocchi, yep. So we did do a little bit of kneading with that. So when we knead, we want to knead with this part of our hand. It's the heel of our hand. Like these would be like the toes if it was our feet. This is our heel of our hand. And we don't want to push on it like this because that won't give us what we need. Instead, we're going to take that part of our hand, and I like to push away So now you can see it's all wet right here, right? So my palm got a little wet. I'm not worried about it. Give it a flip and turn it, and then do it the other way. Fold it into itself and turn it. Knead it the other way. Fold it, turn it, and you'll see you'll get like little layers. Those layers are going to go away once we continue to do this. And it's all going to be one cohesive ball. All right, so let's practice 1 or 2 more times before we officially start. So push away with your heel of your hand. I like to fold it in half and give it a turn. Fold it, push it away, fold it, turn it. That way you're getting all of it. And we don't want it, we want it to remain kind of in a ball. We don't want it flattened out into like a little pancake. It won't work. All right, so I know some of you guys have some youngsters that have cooked pasta with me before, but does anybody think they know how long we have to knead this for? How many minutes?
Until you go crazy.
Till it is about that long, isn't it? So we are gonna knead this for 10 minutes.
Yay.
So there's only 4 ingredients in pasta, right? There's flour, there's salt, oil, and egg. The kneading part is the most important part, and I'm gonna talk about that throughout the 10 minutes, because if I start now, I won't have anything to talk about by the end of the 10 minutes. So, so what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna set a timer for everybody, 10 minutes, and we're starting, where's the 10? Here it is, we're gonna start now. So remember, push away, give it a fold, turn, push away, give it a fold, turn. And you're just gonna keep doing that. And what you'll notice is that, and if you hit a sticky spot and you're totally sticking to it, just put a little bit of flour on it. But what you're gonna notice as you keep going is the dough, which you could see has all flour in it, is gonna become one consistent color. It's gonna become one consistent texture. And it is going to get easier the longer you go. The dough kind of gets softer. If your dough is like really hard and you're having a hard time kneading it, sometimes that happens because we measure the flour with measuring cups instead of by weight for the classes like this. So just give your hands a rinse under the sink, get the water off, and then just touch your dough a little bit, and that will help add a little moisture. But really, I haven't heard anyone say anything about that yet, so I'm going to assume we're all good. So push away.
The weight that it was supposed to be.
What was your question, Krista? I'm sorry.
What was the weight that it was supposed to be?
I would have to look that up because we've been doing this by just the 1 cup measurement. I'm not entirely sure the weight, but I could find out for you guys. Originally, we started teaching pasta classes with kids, and trying to use a food scale with that many kids became very lengthy.
Now I have another question. You said 1 cup. I had it that it was 1.5 cups.
Nope. So you have 1.5 cups provided, but it's 1 cup plus 2 tablespoons of flour, and then the rest of the flour is for rolling out the dough. So that might be why yours looks dry.
All right, we'll start over.
It might be easier, yeah, because I can't even tell you how much extra moisture to add. But go ahead and start over. 1 cup plus 2 tablespoons of flour, 1/2 teaspoon of salt. And then once you have that in there, I'll tell you the wet ingredients. All right. This is fun, guys, right? Lots of manual labor with this recipe, but it's definitely worth it.
Sorry, I don't mean to keep asking questions.
Oh, you're fine.
For 10 minutes. So I looked at, it says you'll need the following for this recipe.
Yep.
And that's the ingredients I'm looking at. And now you also said 1/2 teaspoon salt, not a teaspoon, because it also says a teaspoon salt.
You could do 1/2 or a whole teaspoon, then that's fine. Oh, want to know what it is? 1/2 the teaspoon is for the ricotta mixture. So it's 1/2 for the pasta.
Okay.
It's 1/2 for the pasta, 1/2 for the ricotta.
Got it. So we need, can you tell me again, the full recipe is 1 cup flour plus 2 tablespoons?
Yep. a half a teaspoon of salt.
The 2 tablespoons is for the cutting board, or the 2 tablespoons is for the
Dough.
dough? Okay.
Then
Half a teaspoon. And then how much olive oil?
1 teaspoon.
Thank you.
Yep, and then 2 eggs. That's all that goes in the dough. The rest is for the mixture and for your workspace. All right, so mine is starting to kind of like, it's not sticking to the counter at all anymore. I don't know if you guys can see that. And it kind of has like its own space where I've been kneading it where there's no flour.
Yes.
You guys have that too? Nice. And you guys should notice now, like the folds kind of happen now, right? Like it rolls out into itself. So it's a little bit different than in the beginning.
But mine still is like completely white from the flour that was on the counter.
That's okay. So you just probably had more down on your workstation. You could go ahead and push some to the side and let it go into like a naked spot and see if it sticks. It shouldn't, at least at first.
Nope, it's not sticking.
Yeah, there you go. Perfect. Yeah, so just work on like a naked bit of the counter.
Naked thing.
And that, yeah, it's like a clear bit. Sometimes with the kids, we'll be playing like a guess that food, and like one of my hints for like a nectarine is like a naked peach. Like there's no fuzz, it's just the skin. They get a kick out of it. All right. So who's ever heard of gluten before? I'm sure at this point we all have, right?
Yes.
So when we are kneading, we're basically making the dough more cohesive. Like now all the flour and the salt and the egg and all that good stuff is nice and mixed together into one ball. But also what we're doing is we're helping the gluten develop. So gluten doesn't like exist in dry flour. It's actually 2 different things that turn into gluten. When flour gets wet, and the gluten is responsible for making like a nice sturdy framework for our pasta dough. So like when you see like a nice loaf of like sourdough cut open and it has like those big air bubbles with like that were trapped inside with the inside of the bread when it was baking, that's what kind of gluten does. It helps us have the right texture for whatever our recipe is. For this, it's helping us have a nice, chewy, fresh pasta taste or feel, I guess.
Excuse me.
Yep.
So you say the gluten comes when you knead all the ingredients together, but when you buy gluten-free flour, because a friend of mine cannot have gluten, and I've tried making stuff with gluten-free flour, and she says it's good, but I'm not eating it.
Normally, you have to do something else to mimic the properties of what gluten does in cooking. So if you were going to do a gluten-free pasta recipe, you would need to you would change what you were adding, because you would need to probably add a different kind of something to give it the framework that it needs. And you wouldn't be using like the all-purpose flour. You'd be using something like almond flour, coconut. There's so many different flours now. At this point, any type of thing you want as a flour, you can get.
I used the almond for her.
Yep, my mom bought a giant bag off online a few years ago of coconut flour, so we got really good at using that. But basically anything like that won't have the gluten in it because it's anything from wheat, rye, or barley. But mainly for baking and stuff, it's with wheat products.
So I have a question.
Yep.
Because if this were pie dough, I would think it's so tough. And this is way tougher, harder than bread or pie dough, right?
Yep. So so when you poke it, can you poke like your finger into it?
Mm-hmm.
Like that? Can you like poke your fingers into it?
Yeah.
Okay. So yeah, so pastry dough is totally different. It's like, it's definitely more tender and delicate, right? Like it just kind of falls apart. And the reason for that is you're using butter a little bit of water and the flour to hold it all together. And the butter helps create layers in the pastry. So what will happen is it'll be very delicate from that. But you don't have to need pastry dough. You don't need pastry dough, right? You get it into the dough ball and you roll it out. That's why it's so delicate. This will be, one hearty piece of pasta. Because we're doing the ravioli, it'll be one sheet of pasta. But you could use this recipe to make any type of noodle you want. Of course, like you would need the pieces to cut different shapes, but you could do this with like fettuccine or spaghetti as well.
That's why they have the machine. But
Yeah,
it even tougher than bread dough, right?
Yep. So this is different than bread dough too. Bread dough is like considered like a harder dough. Like it's very hardy. It stays in its shape. Depending on the bread dough, like it's kind of soft and it'll kind of melt a bit, especially when you start playing around with like the different types of bread. Those are more like soft. I don't know how to describe it better than that. But like you would never like be able to touch the bread dough probably like this.
Yeah, this is hard. That's all.
Yeah, it's different. Very different. All right, let's see. T-minus 1 minute, guys. So let's make these last few needs really count.
Excuse me. Mine seems to have divide into layers.
That's okay.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, because if you look like mine, all it basically is we're folding it in on top of itself.
Yeah.
Yep, so that's basically fine. And we're going to roll it all out. It's going to get smashed together anyway.
Good, I got to find the rolling pin.
Yep. So the next thing we're going to need is a rolling pin and a pizza cutter. You don't have to use a pizza cutter. I just find it way easier to cut straight lines with a pizza cutter than a knife. But if you want to use a knife, that's totally fine too.
Excuse me. So mine is still somewhat sticky. Is that right?
So just go ahead and put a little more flour into your workspace and knead it through a few times. We're going to add more flour anyway when we're rolling it out, so I wouldn't be too concerned about it right now. Like I could touch mine and it's fine.
I can see why people like those pasta machines to start putting it through, because this is mine's so hard.
Yeah, it's going to be definitely an experience. You said you could poke yours, right? Like I could poke my finger right through on top of mine and divot it.
And it comes back. No, well,
Mine's coming back. It's just coming back slow. So sometimes, like I said, with the variation of how much flour gets added, you might end up with a little tougher of a dough, but it'll still come out perfect. All right. So we have our dough. You guys have double the amount of dough as me, right? So what we're going to do now is we're going to cut this in half, and then we're going to cut it into fourths. So just go ahead and grab a knife, cut it right in half, and then you can go ahead and cut it right into fourths again.
Okay, it's still stayed in the layers though.
Yep. If you were to really look at your dough, you can see layers in mine too.
Okay.
It's all going to get rolled together anyway, so I wouldn't worry too much about it. So then what I like to do is I like to stamp where I cut because it's kind of wet, more wet right here. I like to give it a little stamp into the flour and then roll them into balls. Makes it a little easier. And they don't have to be perfectly rolled. I'm just trying to get them into a kind of round shape. All right. I'll give you guys a minute to get that in case you didn't have a knife handy. So what we're going to do now is we're going to have our workspace floured. So go ahead and put some flour down. I'm just moving around what I have left. We're going to grab our rolling pin. You guys have bigger circles than I do, so you guys are going to
Here, go find a rolling pin.
I'll wait for everyone in case they need a rolling pin too. You can just take some flour and put it on it. I always find that it comes off immediately, so I'm not really sure how effective that is, but we all do it, so we'll just keep doing it. All right. Does anyone
Megan,
have any? Yep.
have you ever, I'm sorry, I'm on like 2 videos. I'm having
Oh,
a
you're
horrible
fine.
time with my tablet. Do you have you ever laminated like sage or fresh parsley into your dough?
So I've done not the pasta dough like that, but I've did the gnocchi dough like that, and I put fresh basil, like that partially dried basil that comes in the little containers. I've done that. And then I know like a lot of people will do herbs and stuff in their dough. So once you feel comfortable making the pasta, you would just throw it in before you like, I would do it. Honestly, I would do it with the dry ingredients, I think, because everything else would be kind of hard to get like anything mixed into a dough.
Okay.
So I would do it there. But you could also do other cool stuff too, like making the dough different colors, like with beet juice, you can make pink
That would be really neat.
ravioli, or they do spinach with green too.
So we never used the rest of the salt. We only used another pinch.
Yep, that's fine. I didn't know that you guys got a whole teaspoon, so I just told you guys to do a pinch. So if you want to add extra salt to your filling, you can definitely do that. All right, so what we're gonna do is start rolling out our dough. So we want to try, I like to give mine a little flatten first, make it a little easier, make it into a patty instead of a ball, so it's nice and flat now. And what we're going to do is we're going to roll it out, and we want to try to roll it out into rectangle shapes. I'm admittedly not good at choosing a shape and going with it. I don't know how people do it, but we're going to try. So we're just going to try to roll it out like one way, I guess. Okay. And we're just going to start rolling. And you want to go ahead and flip your pasta over because we want to make sure it doesn't end up stuck to the table. Because how frustrating would it be if you got your dough rolled out nice and thin and then you found out it was stuck to the table? I'll tell you how you would feel because I've done it many times. It would not feel good. I might need to use more dough. So I'm going to use 2 balls because remember, I'm using half the recipe, so me cutting it into fourths just made it kind of too tiny. There we go. Yep, perfect. We're going to cut it into a rectangle with the pizza cutter anyway. And we want to keep going until it's thin enough that we could almost see the pigment of our fingers. It's going to be quite thin. I don't need that. All right. Make sure you're giving it some flips. Make sure you're giving it some turns. Just to make sure that it's not sticking to your counter or your cutting board. How do you make this into a rectangle? Beyond me, but hopefully you guys are having better luck with your shapes. All right. Yeah, it definitely takes a minute. You guys might beat me. So if you guys beat me, just let me know and I'll pick up the pace a little bit. So once you get one rolled out, let me know and I'll show you guys how to get the ravioli together. So I have the exact same amount as you guys with this one, and I'm pushing real hard. I always end up with a little bit of wrinkle in mine too.
You're not afraid of it. That's the difference. It is looking smoother.
Yeah, once it starts to get rolled out, it'll come together really nicely, I think. So something I always tell people to be mindful of, that I have to tell myself to be mindful of every time I roll out dough, is to make sure your middle isn't staying thick while your edges are getting thinner. So I have a tendency of focusing on the edges and then forgetting to go over the middle again. So definitely just go over it, make sure you're going over your middle too. So if you put your fingers underneath it, you'll be able to see the pigment of your fingers. So my hands are pretty red right now from using the rolling pin, and I could see like my finger outline. All right, so I think mine is rolled out thin enough. Yeah, I'm pretty happy with that. So I could see, like, again, my hands are pretty red right now from the thing. If I hold it up to, like, to the light, I could definitely see like my hand through it. So I'm gonna give you guys another minute, and then we'll work on, I'll show you guys how to put the first ones together. It's pretty big. All right. Once you have your dough rolled out nice and thin, what we're going to do is we're going to grab a little bowl of water. Doesn't matter if it's warm water, doesn't matter if it's cold water. I'm just going to use a measuring cup so I don't dirty something else. And I'm just going to grab some.
Give you some water.
So this is like a very easy beginner pasta recipe. Again, when we first started teaching how to make pasta, we would do like the semolina flour and the all-purpose. It's normally a blend that you make the dough with.
Oh.
With doing virtual classes, it makes it very tricky. So we've just kind of perfected making it with the all-purpose. All right, I think mine's as rectangle as I could possibly make it, because again, I'm not really sure how people do it so well in the shape. I usually just kind of wing it and cut it to where I need it to be. So I'm pretty proud. This is pretty square. All right. So does everyone want to take a quick break and then just watch my screen real quick, and I'll show you how to make the ravioli. I'm grabbing my filling, giving it a nice quick stir. I just want to make sure I get the exact right amount. So we're going to be placing every 2 fingers worth. So to make this easy, I'm going to start by making mine square or rectangle. So I'm going to cut off the edges that aren't exactly square, and I'll just re-roll those bits out later. So we're going to do 2 finger spacing in between each. So if we start from the bottom, we put 2 fingers. You're going to use a teaspoon measuring spoon. If you want bigger ones, go for it. We're going to start with a teaspoon here, though, just because. There we go. Nice rectangle. Going to add my teaspoon. So probably from the edge, you'll want at least 1 finger. Place a nice dollop of it. See, I think we could definitely do more than a teaspoon. Depending on how yours is rolled out, it'll make more sense once you see what we're doing. And then you could kind of decide if you'd like more filling or not. Because I personally think that these are going to be too big with not enough filling. So I'm going to add a little more. But start with 1 teaspoon each for you guys until you could like visually see what's going on. I'm going to do 1.5 teaspoons with mine just because I already have mine rolled out. Yeah, I think that'll be fine. All right, so we're going to take our cup of water, and water is going to make the dough sticky again. So what we're going to do is we're going to use water, and you're just going to go ahead and paint around the edge. It doesn't need to be stopping wet, it just needs to be sticky. Then you're going to seal in between. You're going to go around, kind of making little T's, right? So I did this edge right here, my long edge, and then I did the 2 ends, and then in between each ravioli. I'm going to go around the inside too, just because I'm a little nervous. They're going to pop. So you guys don't have to do that bit. I just added more than 1 teaspoon, and I took some away, but I'm sure I still have more. All right. So now that I have nice wet squares around all my filling, we're going to go ahead. This is where I said to make sure that your pasta doesn't stick, because how annoying would that be right now? And we're going to go ahead and we're going to flip it right over end to end. And you're just going to use your fingers and press down on the long end first. Then I want you guys to go in between, and we want to try to make sure there's no air bubbles. So you're going to try to squeeze out the air bubbles. Maybe don't seal the long end first. No, it's fine. Mine are all escaping, so yours will all escape too. There we go. Perfect. As long as you leave the ends open, you could push the air bubbles out. Whoever gave me that advice, again, thank you, because these look perfect. It's just, it looks like so little when it's on all that pasta. All right. So we're going to go ahead, push down, make sure they're nice and secured. We push the air bubbles out the ends. You could go in the middle, so you could push it out the long end if you prefer to do that next time. Okay. Then we're just going to take our pizza cutter and cut right in the middle of all of them. They're actually pretty big. And you have a ravioli. If you wanted to tidy up the end we folded over, you can cut some of the extra off. But really, I think these look great. These look just like, well, mine has a little bit of a fold on it, but they look just like ravioli. So mission accomplished. But that's what it takes to make homemade ravioli. And if you look at where you sealed it, like between the 2 cuts, you won't, if it's like nice and sealed, you won't even be able to see that it's not connected, that you connected it with the water. I got about 4 from my bowl, so you guys will probably get anywhere up to 20 to 25 ravioli for this recipe. Depends on how big you make them too. Mine are pretty big. Perfect. Yeah. Anywhere, I'd say you probably up to 25, 30, depending on how conservative you go. Mine are pretty big, so I'm going to eat 3 of them and be fine. All right. So when these cook, all you have to do is boil them for 3 minutes and they'll be done. And then you could just toss them into whatever sauce you're going to use. I'm going to use a red sauce because it's nice and easy. Yeah, one of mine has a real big air bubble too. So we'll see how that goes. I think you might, I actually was able to just push it out very gently out of somewhere that was a little open. So now I know there's an open spot. So now I'm going to seal that again. I think you could probably freeze them. You could also, I've made homemade pasta in camps before and just put them in the fridge overnight and they were fine the next day or two too. So if you stack these on top of each other in the fridge or freezer, if you're not going to use it, you're going to end up with like a ravioli stack because the dough wants to stick to itself. So thank you, Adria. So just go ahead and what you can do is just take some flour. I'll just do it to mine. That's fine. And go ahead, put some flour over it. You know, give them a nice toss. Make sure they're floury on both sides. It's not going to do anything when you boil them. It's just going to make the water extra starchy. So if you use that to make sauce, you have really good quality starchy water. Give them a nice toss, and then they shouldn't stick together. Let's see. Yep, and you could do parchment paper or wax paper would do the same thing. Yep. And then you could freeze them, you know, individually, like layer, another layer. So I would definitely at least make the ravioli or I mean, if you don't want to make the ravioli, you could just cut it into pasta like fettuccine and you could store it in your fridge that way. But I would definitely finish the product so it's ready to be cooked. Now you guys know how to make homemade ravioli, so you could really make any type of ravioli this way. It's always the same like application. Does anybody have any questions or anything? Comments, concerns? Do you guys remember how long to cook these for? Sorry, how long to cook these for? I believe they float, so I think you'll just know at 3 minutes they should be good. If you guys are gonna eat these for lunch, I would turn your water onto your stove now. That way you can cook them and eat them. Also, because it's gonna take you guys a few more minutes to finish rolling everything out. But it should be boiling by the time you're ready. Mine are more squares, which is interesting because the last time we made these, they were rectangles. So, yeah. There's no wrong shape. You can make circle ones too if you wanted. Alrighty, so I'm going to say goodnight because I have to prepare for my next class and somehow finish this. So, 3 minutes to cook, and then if you could send Amanda any photos, I'd love to see what you guys made. And hopefully we see you guys in some other classes we're doing. Bye, guys.